on a lot of people before it gets to you?
The quality is certainly depends on a lot of people and a lot of the conditions that the evidence may have been subjected to. When and how was it deposited? Has it been on an item for an amount of time that leads to, it's been through heat, it's been through bacterial growth. Those things affect the DNA quality of the sample. Who collected it, how they collected it, how it's been handled, how it's been stored. So there are lots of factors that could impact the evidence prior to being received at the laboratory.
And you yourself have no personal knowledge of who committed these crimes?
I do not.
Thank you.
If something is burned, does that impact the quality of the item for your analysis?
It certainly can. Heat does not play nice with DNA. It begins to break it down and degrade it. So it can. It just depends on how long it was exposed to it and how hot the source was.
What about if something is clean, say for instance with bleach?
Bleach can also degrade the DNA. It could also make it difficult for our other screening tests to work as well.
You were talking about the leather strap. You did the swabs yourself.
Yes.
And it's listed as Larry's leather strap for Larry Ordway, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you said earlier that there are 3 profiles, but they're too limited. You can't tell anything about those 3 profiles.
So the swabs from the knot was a mixture of at least 3 individuals, and no meaningful comparisons could be made. The swabs from the presumptive blood testing was at least 2 individuals, and again, no comparisons could be made.
You couldn't even identify Larry Ordway's DNA on there, right?
Since no comparisons could be made to either of these samples, we couldn't say whether or not Larry Ordway's DNA was or was not present.
So nobody was included and nobody was excluded.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Nothing else? Okay, thank you. You're free to go. Thank you. Next witness for the Commonwealth? Yes.
It's Denali.
We're going to take a 10-minute break before the next witness. If you could just make sure you're back outside the doors around 10:55.
All rise to the jury.
Can I see the attorneys up here for just a moment? So, not a big deal, and I have just ignored it, but someone sends an email to Janelle last night. I'm assuming because, if you look me up, our circuit court website has Janelle's contact information, and it says, "Dear Judge, you need to order all people in the courtroom to have no phones," which we have done. You also need to stop law and crime from covering Brice trial. I will be contacting the lawyer for Brice. New trial. This is not good, Judge, at all. Make law and crime leave the courtroom. Death threats are being said in the chat room of the trial being covered by law and crime. I'm just conveying it to you. We are ignoring it.
I haven't been looking at any of the
I
comments
haven't
on that,
either.
Judge. I don't know anything
I
about it.
do not. I do not believe that any jurors are in there commenting, but putting it out there so you all know about it.
Sure. And I think you asked them this morning.
Yeah,
or if-
yeah. They all said no problem. And the only people that should have a cell phone in the courtroom are attorneys or law enforcement.
It's Andy Wolfson. He's
This is gonna provide no steam. Yes, we are.
So I am playing same thing with Kelly. I stopped it at stop.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Appreciate it. What's going on? All right. Well, we always said when in doubt, reset. So I'll reset.
Sorry, I just walked back to my chair right now and seen this. He's going to turn on his lawyers. Sorry, I just walked back to my chair right now and seen this. Okay. He's not to be trusted. I know. Did you see him with that rubber band in his hand? I watched that. I don't know where it went. It looked like he put it back down on the desk or table. But I don't know. I wouldn't trust him. No way. Somebody like him should never, ever, ever be trusted. Just by watching all his behaviors. Look at his own friends trusted him, and look what happened. Either dead or locked up.
So I've just hit reset. We're gonna try it again, but this will be the second time I've tried reset. Okay, thanks. All right, goodbye. He'll be done in a minute. Oh, that doesn't mean anything yet. Now look, that's at HDMI 1, and aren't you in 2? The system just had to know you were on the way. It's done. They got it. Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Ballinger. You want to take it?
I guess somebody, I'm not 100% where. Somebody contacted the courthouse clerk and was telling them that somebody in the courtroom was on their phone or had their phone or using their phone. I don't know what that's all about. I'll look into it. Grandma, where the hell have you been? Where have you been, woman? I have missed you. Our dude here, Brice, he had a band-aid in his hand, or a band-aid, a rubber band in his hand. He was playing with a rubber band. We are on this channel today. Yeah, Kit True Crime. Or not Conversations of a Killer. No. We're on plain old Kit. Grandma, you would trust this boy, wouldn't you? Grandma. Tell me, with that face. Yeah, shut up.
15 jurors are present, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy. Probably seated. Ms. Jones-Brown, do you still need this?
I'm gonna use it.
Okay.
Eventually.
All right, anybody have anything they need to report? Perfect. Your next witness?
Calls Detective Aaron Tonelli.
Detective Tonelli, when you are ready, I'll have you raise your hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. Yes, I know it's still warm in here. They say they're working on it. If anybody needs to take their jacket off or anything, of course, feel free to do so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Detective Aaron Tonelli. Tonelli, Tinelli.
Where do you work?
Louisville Metro Police Department,
How long have you been there?
approximately 18 years.
And how long have you been a detective?
Approximately 12 to 13 years.
In where are you currently positioned?
Currently in the robbery unit.
Where were you in 2016?
I was in the homicide unit.
When did you switch from homicide to robbery?
The last part of 2017 going into 2018.
Can you describe a bit how the homicide unit works as far as case assignments and distribution of cases?
Okay. So at that time we had, it seemed like a large unit, but it really wasn't. It was like 24, 25 detectives somewhere in there. But it was kind of split down the middle. Part of it was non-fatal shooting. The other half was what we call the fresh side or the homicide side. And you had a rotation where detectives would run a list. And as you picked up a case, the next person would move up and the next person would move up. And then that case would go to the person as it goes down.
And it's fresh to distinguish from cold case.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So on May 22nd, 2016, was it your turn?
Yes, it was.
And do you do all the work on the case by yourself?
No.
Okay. How do you all decide who pitches in to help?
It's all hands kind of evolution, basically. Yes, there's a lead detective. And yes, that lead detective is what I'm doing today, trying to explain the case the best they possibly can so that you can understand the functions of it. But while you're investigating, everybody that's available that can help does help and does contribute to the case.
And do you have supervisors within the
Yes.
unit? Who was your supervisor?
My supervisor on that day was, at the time, Sergeant Donald Burbrink,
And then who was his supervisor?
Lieutenant Kessinger.
And is he in charge of all of homicide?
Yes.
So what happened on May 22nd that alerted you to the existence of this case?
I received a phone call from Sergeant Burbrink that we had a homicide in the 4000 block of Road Park and that I was to respond to that location.
And how did Sergeant Burbrink know about the homicide?
I believe he was notified by Detective Vance.
What happened or what time did police find out about this case?
I believe we were notified at 12:10 in the afternoon,
And what time did you get there?
around 12:45.
Okay, what did you do at the scene?
As soon as I got to the scene, I can I refer to my notes? Well, thanks. If need be, I don't need it.
Yeah, if you can't remember something in particular.
Thank you. First thing I did is I got to the scene and I spoke to Detective Vance and Sergeant Burbrink about what we were actually looking at and what we had before us.
And go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and other detectives that were there, trying to understand the totality of the circumstances walking into a situation like that.
What did you notice about the neighborhood?
Well, it was residential houses all around. There were some kids playing on the other side of the alley. Just a residential area.
Did the house appear where the bodies were found? Did the house appear to be occupied?
No, the house appeared to be vacant. The grass was overgrown, front and rear. Boards were on the windows.
And how did police? Do you know how police even knew those bodies were there?
They got a dispatched run to the location, being notified by a individual in the area.
Who do you all involve another agency when there's a death?
Yes.
And who is that?
Well, in this situation, obviously we notify the coroner's office because they have to respond. And we, the people on scene before Detective Vance, I believe called for arson because there were signs of burning and so forth. We also notify CSU. We also notify, the coroner notifies TIES.
And TIES is the transport agency we heard about earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
So how many personnel from all of these agencies ended up on the scene, would you say?
Oh, I couldn't guess, but a lot.
What did you note about the bodies?
Upon approaching the children, first thing we noticed is that they were laid out. There was no sign of like a struggle or other signs that there was like some kind of disturbance within it besides the actual bodies themselves and the actual burning of the bodies. So the first thing I noticed is that there's a good chance that they were not killed there or murdered there.
Did you have any way to identify them at that time?
No, we did not.
Did you or other detectives search the neighborhood for any clues?
Yeah, other detectives canvassed the neighborhood, talked to individuals in the neighborhood, and spoke to several different people.
Did you look for cameras?
Yes, all the detectives that were on the scene at the time looked for cameras, looked for not just like business cameras and stuff like that, but they looked for house cameras. Some houses have cameras and stuff like that. They looked all over.
Were there any cameras that helped out?
No, ma'am.
Given that did the coroner direct the bodies to be taken to the medical examiner's office?
She did.
Okay. What's left for you all to do at that point?
Oh. Well, at that point, since we have unidentified victims, our job is to gather as much information as we possibly can. Detective Vance was going to handle the scene investigation. Other detectives were canvassing. I was trying to organize the situation, and we were trying to, in any way, shape, or form, identify these two kids that were in the back of this house that were murdered.
Does LMPD have a unit that deals with missing people?
Yes. I contacted Detective Hogan, who was at the time was in the missing persons unit. I instructed her to go through missing persons, go through the database, the local database, the national database, to try to help to identify or get some kind of parameters with the visual inspection of the two kids. So you're looking at these two children and you're trying to guess age, you're trying to guess weight, you're trying to guess all these things to give her as much information so that she can go to these databases and try to get you a range of possibilities, which is extremely difficult.
At that time, did you all identify any possible people they could be?
A list was started, and I know that she gathered that information, but not on that day. It wasn't until the next morning that we got that list.
Okay. So the next day, did you attend the autopsies?
I did.
And what did you observe at the autopsies?
Kids were laid out. You observed just the several wounds to the upper torso, lower torso, and genitals. The strap that was on one of the victims that presumptively restrained them in some way. The burning, the charring, and the other factors.
And were fingerprints attempted?
They were attempted I refer to my notes because I don't want to speak incorrectly. I believe fingerprints were attempted at the scene and again at the autopsy only because the fingers were charred so badly. So I do not want to misspeak about that, but I believe it was attempted at both locations.
Okay. Did you come up with another idea for identifying them?
Yes. So anytime you have a child that's been, there's the possibility of them being fingerprinted it's minute. So I came up with the idea that we would contact one of our CSU techs that was also a forensic artist. That's CSU tech, Aaron Wright. And I asked her if she could do a rendering of the two kids so that if we had to put that on the news or someplace else to have the community help us identify these kids, that we could use them. she agreed, and we took photographs of the kids as they were, and she began her renderings.
Why couldn't you just put the photographs on the news?
Nobody needs to see that on the news. If that's your child. To see that for the first time would be, yeah, I'm a dad. That would be devastating. I
Were,
couldn't do that.
were the sketches put on the news?
Yes.
And did that result in any leads?
Yes, actually it did. Excuse me. The next day, the 24th, we gathered together in the office to come up with because we still hadn't identified the bodies. And we came up with a game plan. And one of the things that came up with was the fact that we had gotten a tip from Olmsted Middle School that the assistant principal thought she knew who the kids were from the renderings that we had placed on the news. So with that being said, she gave Detective Spaulding the information, and Detective Spaulding went to the school, and me and Sergeant Burbrink went to the location that was given to her by the assistant principal at the school.
A location, do you mean address of the children?
Yes.
Okay.
Where they lived.
And what was that address?
I know it by heart, but unfortunately I'm a little, I apologize. (4817) Cliff Ave.
And what neighborhood is that in?
It's next to Iroquois, is next to the south end of Louisville.
Who was there?
Miss Elizabeth Wren.
Did she have other family members present?
She did. There was another individual there, TJ, who was her brother.
Did you show her the sketches?
Me and Sergeant Burbrink went up to the mother, started to ask her relative questions without having to show her the picture of her dead children.
I'm sorry, did you say it was her brother that was there with
I
her?
believe it was her brother, yes, TJ Wren.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
So once we got the feeling that this could possibly be the mom, I asked Sergeant Burbrink if I could show a picture, an actual photo of the deceased child, and she was able to positively identify her children.
Did you interview her?
Yes.
They are, and at the station eventually?
Yes.
Okay. And did you all interview TJ?
Yes.
Did you gather enough information that led you to the next step?
Yes. Once we interviewed those two individuals, we gathered the possibility of suspects, and then we started our investigation moving forward. And this is when things started to move very quickly.
So where was the first place you headed?
The first place we went to was to Brice Rhodes' residence to confirm the location of 763 North Height, which we at the time didn't know, but the brother of Elizabeth Wren, TJ, was able to show us the location.
And is that what Sergeant Vance testified about earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Were you with Sergeant Vance?
No, I was not.
Were you still with Elizabeth Wren?
Yes.
Okay. What's going on where you are?
Okay. So where we're at, we're trying to gather as much information as we can. We're also did a consent search of the location to see if there's any possible evidence located at the house.
Did you locate anything?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. And trying to organize that, and then informing other detectives of what we had at that location, and that we have confirmed the identity of the two children. So then we move to canvassing, talking to people, and trying to get as much information as we could and gather that.
Okay, so Sergeant Vance heads over with TJ to Heights.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you all talking back and forth while this is going on?
Nah, me and Sergeant Vance are not talking. Sergeant Vance is talking to Sergeant Burbrink and stuff like that, only because I am more focused on the information that we're gathering at the house.
And who were you with?
I was with Sergeant Burr. Oh, who was I talking to, or who was I?
Well, who was present at the house with you and Elizabeth Wren?
Oh, Sergeant Burbrink, and then we had other detectives that showed up.
Okay. And as we heard earlier, Sergeant Vance was also with other people, correct?
Yes,
Were you notified that the defendant was picked up at the Speedway in Preston?
yes.
Okay, what happens then?
I leave the location that I'm at, which is on Cliff, and I head back to the office to help to orchestrate the interview.
And we'll get to that in a second. What did Miss Wren give you information about her son's phone?
Yes, she did. One of the questions we asked, which would be a question you would ask any parent, is why didn't you file a missing persons or contact the police? And she had stated that she had been in contact with one of their friends, and their friends had said that they were out to the store and he was using their phone to call when we get back. And that information led us to another part of the investigation.
Did she provide you with a phone number?
She did.
And were you able to do anything with that phone number?
Yes, we were able to take that phone, considering the information that we had from the house and the fact that a relative time frame of when the kids were last there. We took that phone number and we used that phone number and the assistance of the U.S. Marshals to start pinging that phone and finding out where its location was.
Did the marshals figure that out?
They did.
And is that what Sergeant Vance testified to about going to the location and finding the phone with Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Did you know what car the defendant was stopped in?
Yes.
And how did that lead in? What did you investigate there with the car?
Well, the black Dodge Charger what he was stopped in, that information led us to holding that vehicle and using it and searching it and trying to gather evidence from it.
And did you know initially whether that was his car or not?
Not initially. Once we ran it and we understood that it was a rental, then we took that information, found out who the rental party was, and then we passed that information on to other detectives, and they located that individual, Mr. Christopher Jensen.
And is that what Detective Rutherford testified about the direction he took on the case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At that point, did you all find out about another car?
We did.
And what was that?
That was the Mazda 3, blue Mazda 3.
And is that what Mr. Jensen talked about providing?
Yes.
Was that car also located and held?
Yes.
Is all of this going on at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. And where are you?
Now I am back at the office because we have got Mr. Rhodes in custody, and I am preparing to go forward with that part of the investigation.
So did you interview him?
Yes.
And was that interview recorded?
Yes.
And is this all happening on May 24th? So.
Yes.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth moves to admit and play the interview of the defendant as Exhibit 177.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Johnstone.
Well, here's the thing, man. We are looking for two missing kids, and we don't know. We heard that you might know where they might be. Or
Just to backtrack a little. Was there a little introductory part where you all chit chatted before we get to this part?
you were seen with them or talk to them, any way, shape, or form. Anything you could help us to find them, we would appreciate it.
Who are they?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. Brice
And who else?
and Larry.
I know him. Yeah.
Have you seen them lately?
No, I haven't seen him about a week. You haven't seen him in a week? Yeah, I ain't seen him about a week. And try to the best you can, because we're trying to track these kids down. When was the last time that you remember seeing them? Where was it?
Oh, probably at Circle K or riding down Taylor. Like I see them like through the neighborhood. Cause I got a girl that stays in the South area, and I might see them out playing basketball and stuff like that.
Circle K on Taylor?
Yeah, kind of by Circle K.
And man, I know like we're trying to throw this on you like all of a sudden, but like ballpark time that was.
Probably around 4 or 5 o'clock.
What day is that?
Probably like what's the day?
Today is Tuesday.
I don't know, probably around last Tuesday, to be honest. Tuesday or Wednesday. Not trying to lie, probably around Tuesday or Wednesday.
And we're talking 4 or 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
Last.
Yeah, I always see like a bunch of them walk through the neighborhood because everybody goes to Wyandotte Park, right? Plays basketball. That's so everybody knows each other.
Do you play ball?
Yeah, I play a little bit. Everybody's always at the park, so everybody, pick up games. So that's how people kind of know each other. Everybody's always around the neighborhood and stuff and tied out.
You close to these kids at all?
They're cool. We play basketball. I'm cool with a lot of people.
Man, where do you think they may go?
Where would you think that they could possibly, do you know any friends
To
that
be honest, outside of that, I mean, everybody's cool, but I don't know. It's like everybody's cool with a lot of people. It's like damn near 50 to 100 people. Everybody's cool. Like people hang with different. One day, me and you might hang and play basketball. Next day, I might not see you for a week, and like I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, how tight were you with them? Did you hang out with them on a regular basis?
They was cool. Yeah, we hung at different times. Different times.
All right,
Went to the park, play basketball. Might go out to eat or something. They was cool.
Ladies, any girls that are interested?
Any girls that they know?
He had a lot of female friends, to be honest.
Which one?
I guess both of them.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I was at the park. I seen a lot of people, a lot of different females and stuff. I mean, everybody was cool. It was like it's a big neighborhood. Everybody hangs with everybody. Everybody's cool.
Nobody in particular they were dating.
I don't really think it's business. You know what I mean?
did he ever hang out with any particular people there? Like any certain people that he that they other guys that you might know that they might hang out with more often than you?
Some dude named Joe that hung out with a lot.
Joe?
Yeah.
Anything other than Joe, like a street name or anything?
No, that's it. For real.
Black male, white male.
Black man. About 24, 25.
So these kids, so they were hanging with like kind of an older group.
Like, yeah, different people.
Because how old are you?
I'm 25.
Does Joe drive a car?
No, I just hear him always be like, I'm with Joe or this or that. I never really ask questions. Like, people don't really get people's business. Like, it's like you fuck with a girl, what she look like? No, why? Who you with?
No,
I don't really ask questions.
I got you. Have you ever seen, do you know Joe at all?
Nah.
Not tight with him at all?
Nah, I don't really know who he is. I just hear about him with different people and, just everybody, it's all kind of people. People hang different people,
Did they ever talk about going to any other parks?
Just wind up.
No other parks?
And that's the only one that basketball for.
Do you know what school they went to or anything like that?
No.
You know their family?
Yeah, I know their uncle. I know their mother. I'm cool with uncle and mother. I used to date their mother, probably like last summer. Used to talk to her and stuff. Not date her, but like just kind of like
Hang out?
Yeah, hang out with her, go to the get something to eat or something. But we just quit talking. Then I just see them at the basketball courts and stuff like that. But everybody was friends.
Have you ever been to their house? Have you ever been?
Yeah, I've been to the house. Yeah.
But I mean, you hung out with their mom?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've been there.
When was the last time?
It's on Cliff. What'd you say?
When was the last time you were at their house?
Probably like Tuesday or something. Tuesday, Wednesday.
So like around the last time you saw him?
Yeah, around last time I saw him.
Let me ask you this. Everything cool at home life for anything? Any concerns there?
I believe their mother's on drugs now. She's alcoholic and she's on heroin.
So that's not cool.
That's the only thing I know of. And I know they always they're never home. They always run away. Not run away, but like they're never home. Every time I see them out, I could be riding down Taylor or, early in the morning, what y'all doing? Why ain't y'all at school? Or nothing like that. as far as I know, I don't really go over it like that.
So did you, has anybody said anything about him, anything like that, from the neighborhood?
Actually, TJ, he texted my phone today. Their uncle
Yeah.
talking about, he's like, somebody they're dead or something like that. And I'm like, I text him, I'm like, are you joking? You know what I'm saying? And he never texted me back. No, actually, he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm like, are you joking? Like, then I called him, he didn't answer, but I'm thinking like, I don't know, did they run away or like what happened? I'm trying to call him, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure it out, man. We're still
Like, I
trying
don't know. I tried to get in touch with him, but I couldn't. He didn't ever call me back. But, you know.
Did you, have you, I mean, rack your brain, man. Is there anybody that they would hang out with that you would know?
They hang out with a lot of people, you know.
I mean, on a regular basis, you know, it's not like, you know the difference between a friend, associate and a friend, right?
Yeah.
Associate is somebody you say hi to.
To be honest, you know, they was in the gang, and I don't know. They hung out with different crowds.
What gang were they in?
I don't really know because I don't really ask them, but I knew they was in because the people they hung with and different type of crowds and things they used to say and stuff like that. At the basketball courts, it always be fights up there, you know, with different people, you know, a lot of drama at the basketball.
Right, yeah.
And me as an older person, y'all don't do that around here. Talking to all the young kids, all the people too. We come here to play basketball. All that negativity, y'all can take it around the corner somewhere, and there's a police station across the street. You know, so we come here to play basketball.
Man, I think you grew up in the area.
No, I just.
You're comfortable on the street.
What's that?
I mean, you're comfortable on the street, like you're street smart, right? I
What's
mean,
that mean, like?
I mean, like you know, like man, you don't talk to people about stuff when you don't got that kind of relationship with them. Like you can survive on the street, right?
I mean, I guess.
So I mean, we got gangs, you know, that people are in. The kids are like, yeah, we're the new clique, but they're not really doing anything. I mean, are they in a? I mean, from the people that they were hanging out with, are you getting the impression that this was more serious, or there's a bunch of kids running around like fake?
To be honest, I didn't really. I just talked to mom last summer and stuff, and I never really did talk to them. And like as it got hot again, everybody be at the basketball court. It's like, oh hey, where y'all been at? You know what I'm saying? Because her mother broke up. We got into an argument, you know, over. I guess she thought I was cheating on her or something like that. But it was nothing serious. Over some money, I think. And that was back last summer. You know what I'm saying? And so I seen them. You know what I'm saying? This summer, everybody's at the basketball. Hey, what you doing? Stuff. They hang with different people and stuff. I don't ever ask who's this and who's that. But you know.
Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up on down the market.
Down the market.
Yeah.
Is that your car?
17. What's that?
Is that your car? Your
No,
truck?
that's actually my friend's car. They just lets me get it whenever he's like going to work or he's going different places and stuff. You know, he lets me get it.
Okay. I didn't know, man. I was just asking. Is it around?
I believe so.
How long have you had the car?
I just got it today, actually.
Just got it today. Does it let you use it on a regular basis or no?
You know, here and there. You know,
So you used that car before?
I mean, yeah, here and there.
How long have you been using it?
Just like today and a couple times last week. Couple times.
So like, I mean, the way you say that kind of suggests that like historically borrowed cars from him. Has it been different cars?
Not just that, you know. He might get a rental or something, and I'm like, you know, use one here and there.
Okay. But you've only been using this car for a week and a half?
Not just, yeah, probably, yeah, consider it.
Like a week and a half?
Nah, probably like a month for real.
A month?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is there anything we haven't asked that you think might be wrong?
I mean, y'all don't want to answer the questions.
Well, man, we're just trying to find the kids.
I mean, y'all, you know, y'all got the questions, I'll answer, you know, whatever you want.
No, I mean, I respect that, but I'm saying is, like, oftentimes, people won't tell you something because you didn't ask the right question. So is there something that we're not asking that, like, you think
I
maybe?
mean, where they run away to, like,
Well, if we do that, man, we won't be here.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I wish I could help know where they was, you know.
All right, man, well, we'll be back in and we'll figure out and we'll get you over to where you gotta be, all right? Appreciate that. Thanks, Brice. Appreciate it, man. Yeah. Think you want water or anything?
I'm all right.
Bag of chips or anything?
So, I'm cool. Thank you.
all leave at that point?
Yes.
And did you come back a few minutes later with a follow-up question?
Yes.
Hey, man. We're just gonna be completely honest with you, man. We got video of your charger being there on Saturday. Were you there Saturday?
Being where?
In front of the Maurice's and Larry's house.
Y'all probably seen him and shit.
Okay.
Okay, so obviously at this point you knew the kids were dead, right?
Yes.
Why were you acting like you didn't know that when you were talking to him?
We use various investigative techniques to get the individual to tell us things, to get to the truth.
Did you have a video of the charger in front of Elizabeth Wren's house?
No.
After you interviewed him, what did you do?
Oh, okay. In this process, once we were done interviewing Mr. Rhodes, at that point, I believe Mr. Anwan Carter was already brought down to the thing, and I switched my attention over to there.
Okay. Did you conduct the interview with Mr. Carter?
I conducted the very first interview with Mr. Carter, yes.
How did that interview initially go?
Not well. Not well at all.
Did he tell you what he told us here in court?
No.
Okay. At what happened to conclude that interview? How did that interview? Did he ask for a lawyer?
Yes.
Okay, so when somebody asks for a lawyer, what do you do?
Leave the room.
What happened next with him?
He wanted to talk to his family. We let him talk to his family,
And who was his family?
his sister and his mom.
Okay.
And then the sister approached us and told us that he wanted to reinitiate and talk to us. At that point, it's important that we follow the rules so closely. So I talked to another sergeant that was in charge of me at the time, a Sergeant Lesher, and I requested Sergeant Lesher go back into the room, reread him his rights, explain to him the situation, and then he conducted the second interview while I observed it from another room.
Was that interview, did he tell you what he told us in court?
Yes.
Okay. So what were the crucial pieces of information that you gathered from that interview that helped your investigation?
Yes.
And what were they?
Okay. Well, obviously the story that you heard in testimony.
Did this now let you know where the murder happened?
Yes.
While you're doing all this, was the first search warrant at Height that we heard about going on?
Yes.
Okay, so did you all get new information that caused the second search warrant to happen?
Once Anwan reinitiated and Sergeant Lesher began talking to him and gathered the information, we took that information, and once we had enough and we realized that it was no longer looking for a murder weapon, we were looking at a murder scene, we had to change the dynamics, write another search warrant, and go back over to 7663 North Height.
Why didn't you just pull out the carpet the first time you were in there?
If we pulled out the carpet of every single house we went into for every single search warrant, I don't know if there would be an uproar, would there not? We don't pull up the carpet because we don't have any evidence to support the idea that we need to pull up the carpet. When you do a search warrant, you're looking for specific items, right? So the initial search warrant, we're looking for a murder weapon. We're looking for anything that would lead us to the next step. Once we gathered this information from Mr. Carter, that the murder actually occurred at 763 North Height, well, now we have to change our gears. We have to write another search warrant and start a more forensically motivated search.
And at the time that Detective Middleton collected the two knives, did you have any idea if those were the murder weapons or not?
No.
So do you all just collect things just to be safe?
Well, we knew the kids were stabbed. So those two knives were under a bed. Logically speaking, okay, let's take those knives.
Was this the first time you all had information that Christopher Jones' murder was connected to this case?
Yes.
And so did you alert Detective Griffin?
I notified Detective Griffin.
And did you get information on a third individual from Mr. Carter? Ja'Cory Taylor.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, we did. He referenced Mr. Taylor several times as Corey and explained to us that Lil Corey and Ja'Cory was the individual that was also at the location when the murders took place and participated.
What did you do with that information?
Detectives went out. Actually, let's make sure we go in line here. While this information is coming to us and while we're conducting the other search and while we're doing all this other stuff, more information is coming in from other people. Detective Vance is giving us information. And we're gathering information about everything that was going on that day. I believe it was, I don't want to misspeak. Oh, yes. While this is going on, we're also, Detective Rutherford also interviewed Mr. Christopher Jensen. And during this interview with Mr. Christopher Jensen, we located the blue Mazda. And it was relayed to us about the unbelievable smell of bleach coming from the Mazda and the missing backseat.
So what did you all do with that information?
That information, Sergeant Lesher gathered more information from Mr. Carter, and we sent Detective Peters, who you heard testify the other day, and Detective Metzler out to go look for the back seat and the burnt dumpsters.
And did you receive word that a dumpster had been identified as possibly containing a backseat?
Yes. Detective Peters called Lieutenant Kessinger, and Lieutenant Kessinger told me we found it. Found the backseat.
Okay. Did you or a detective arrest eventually Ja'Cory Taylor?
Yes.
When did that happen?
The 25th.
Was he interviewed?
Yes.
And did he testify, or did he state what he testified to in court at that time?
Yes.
Did he admit to this case at that time?
During which interview?
Sorry. All right. On May 25th, did Ja'Cory Taylor admit to the crime?
No.
Okay. In fact, he interviewed for a long time with you
Yes.
and denied it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did the interview of did Ja'Cory Taylor and or Anwan Carter tell you about other individuals being present with Brice Rhodes and them and Larry and Maurice at Hyde Avenue?
Yes.
What information did you get from them that could or did not help with further identification?
From which one? I'm sorry.
From, let's say, did Ja'Cory give you any information that helped?
He just told us about a light-skinned male and a black-skinned male. He didn't, a dark-skinned male. He didn't give us anything other than that, really.
Okay. What about Anwan?
Anwan Carter on I believe it was the third interview, we were able to deduce some of the information that he gave us and come up with a possible individual. And we conducted a photo pack. That photo pack gave us an individual that I went forward and arrested, and his case was adjudicated separately.
And are we talking about down the road when they came in for their later interviews that you got this
I
information?
didn't lock up the fourth subject until November, I believe.
And what is his name?
Tareen Coleman.
Okay. And that was handled separately?
Yes.
Okay. What did you ever get information on this fifth person? Was Tareen Coleman believed to be the dark skinned or lighter
The
skinned?
dark skinned.
Okay. What about the lighter skinned male? Did you,
Nothing.
if you had
Oh,
that
we're
information?
suited.
I'm sorry.
I mean, in November, this happened in May. In November, I received information and we could confirm the identity of Tareen Coleman. We don't stop. we go forward. We go get the bad guys. That's our job, right? So yes, if I had any information at all that would relatively tell me who the light-skinned individual was, I would pursue that as any detective would.
When do you recall when the second? So you had the first interview of Carter, which was broken into two parts, with
Yes.
his family talking to him in the middle. The second interview of him, do you recall what day or what month that was?
The second interview,
Well, the second time that he was interviewed.
I'm sorry.
Okay, you had the first day, May 24th.
Right.
Is there a second time that you come back and interview him?
Yes.
And
Yes.
When
Yes.
was that?
That was when you were present
Yes.
along with his lawyer. I'd have to refer to gosh, I don't know.
Was it months later?
Yes.
Okay.
Months later.
And same for Ja'Cory Taylor. Do you recall when that happened?
It was months later.
Was that also in the presence of his attorney
Yes.
and me? We talked about a lot of addresses and just let the jury know where these are. I'm just gonna bring up Google Maps and show these locations. Okay. Tell me the address on River Park where the bodies were found.
4028 River Park Drive.
And so they would have actually been behind that house, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where did the children live?
They lived at 4817 Cliff Ave.
Okay. And what about height?
763 North Height.
And then do you recall, or do you have in your notes the address of the dumpster?
Yes. Address, 1 second, please. Uh, 6508 Hackle Drive.
All right, I want to make a chart of what was happening on each day, just because I know we've thrown out a lot of dates, and I want to make sure that the jury understands what was happening when. So this started on May 22nd.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a summary of police involvement with this case on that day. You want me to River Park?
Yeah, we went to River Park, 4028 River Park.
Okay.
Canvas, did our initial investigation. Detective Vance was the scene investigator and spoke to the area, looked for cameras, looked for people.
Okay. And this involved police, CSU.
Arson, everybody. Corner.
And that included searches of the surrounding neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
On May 23rd. What happened that day?
Autopsy.
And how quick is an autopsy?
It's not fast
Were you there all?
the whole time.
What else is going on that day?
May 23rd. Okay. So May 23rd, we're doing the autopsy, we're gathering information, and we're also doing follow up on trying to identify the children.
And is that including the missing persons database? And the
Yes.
sketches?
Missing person database, the sketches, talking to the news and media to try and coordinate it to do it the most tactfully and best way to put that information out.
All right, next day, May 24th.
Okay.
Is that the day that Olmsted contacted you all?
I would have to refer to Detective, well, at the time, Detective Spaulding's letter. I don't want to give the wrong information, but I got the information, me personally, on the 24th.
Children identified. Is that the day you went to Elizabeth Wright's house?
It is.
And is that the day that Sergeant Vance took TJ Wren to Height Avenue?
Yes.
Is that the day that the defendant was stopped?
Yes.
At the gas station and taken into
Custody. Yes.
Is that the day that the first Height search warrant happened?
Yes.
And is that the day that Sergeant Vance went to Anwan Carter's residence and found him with the phone?
Yes.
Let's see. Did you interview the defendant that day?
Yes.
Did you interview Miss Wren also?
Yes.
And I believe you said you went straight from that interview into Mr. Carter's interview?
Yes. Relatively speaking, yes.
Is that the day of the second search warrant?
Yes.
On Height Avenue?
On Height, yes.
Is Detective Rutherford out there interviewing Chris Jensen on that day?
Yes.
And is that the day Detective Royce processed the charger?
I believe so. I want to make sure about that. I'm sorry. Yes. As stated in his letter.
Okay. And are other detectives out canvassing Heights during this? Or at least that apartment complex?
Yes.
Okay. Did a detective go talk to a child at Olmsted?
Yes.
Did you all attempt to process the phone that was collected from Anwan Carter?
Yes.
Did that-
Detective Mickey Kahn did. We didn't get anything from the phone. Our Cellbrite machine wouldn't download it.
And did you all get anything out of that interview with the kid at Olmsted?
Not according to the information that we received.
And when we're talking about the phone, it would have been Brice's phone that Anwan Carter ended up with.
Yes.
If you could refer, if you need to Detective Vance's letter on May 26th, is that when he collected the boots at Liberty Belleville Way, Monisha's apartment? Oh, I'm sorry, I just skipped it.
Yeah, that was on the 25th.
Okay, May 25th. May 25th, is that the day you all processed the Mazda?
I believe so.
And I believe we heard from Detective Silveria that other detectives, I believe Rusty Holland brought her buckle swabs and clothes of the defendant and of Anwan Carter that day.
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
And were his buckles the one that was collected?
Yes.
And by buckles, so we mean the swabs they sent out for the
Yes.
and was that the day, the 24th into the 25th of Detective Peters being at the dumpster?
Yes.
And did Corey Taylor interview that day?
Yes.
So then, sorry, the 26th, was that the day of the collection of boots?
Yes.
So when all this wraps up, do you just stop working on this case?
No.
What were you doing?
There is unbelievable amounts of paperwork, unbelievable amounts of information that you have to process and continue. We were doing research on trying to find out who the other two individuals were that were in the home at the time of the murders. We were trying to gather the evidence that we had on the house, the suspects, and the victims.
And I believe we've heard from Detective Silveria. In fact, in July, did you do the cutting out of the Mazda?
We did.
Okay, so you keep working on the case.
Yes.
Did you start the court process?
Yes.
What day was the preliminary hearing on this case?
I don't know the exact date. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did you saw a transcript with that help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Jones Brown, I'm sorry, what did you say you were trying to?
The date of the preliminary. Approach.
You may.
June 3rd
Of,
2016.
Okay. And then do you ultimately testify in the grand jury on this case?
Yes.
Was that in July?
Yes.
Do you recall the exact date?
I think July 13th, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Of 2016. Sorry.
So then later, after all this, we have October, you interview Carter again. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember the
Okay.
date.
We'll just put later.
Months later. Yes.
And from that interview, you got information on the.
Not from the. Yeah, you're talking about Carter. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Led to Terry Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Later, you interviewed Jacory. Again, correct?
Yes.
And then when, like, on May 25th, do you have all the reports? On
No.
that day? When do you get reports?
Months later, like months later. CSU is
When
processing.
does CSU give you reports?
At various times throughout, like, I know for example, I believe the report for they're emailed.
To use an example, a Detective Kimmer's report, when did you get that?
Detective Kimmer report was 9/7 of 2016.
Okay.
I think. Yes.
And that was the report about the dumpster.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And
we heard from the lab analysts that they're sending you reports in 2017. Is that approximately when you received those reports?
Yes.
And during all of this time, this is your only case.
No.
What
No.
else are you doing?
Oh my gosh. 2016, Louisville homicide. We broke records on homicides. We had over 120 homicides, one of the highest epidemics of the heroin epidemic. Homicide is in charge of not just homicides, but also death investigations, suicides, overdoses. No, this was not my only case. In fact, I think in November of that year, I was also the lead detective on the double homicide with 9 people shot during Thanksgiving at the Juice Bowl.
I have a question. I'm gonna ask you a question about the lab testimony we heard earlier. We were all using a lot of numbers. I don't know the jury doesn't have the reports that you have for the case. Was this the leather strap we've seen in the photo that was on Larry's arm at the time of his death?
Yes, ma'am.
And were these the knives that Detective Middleton collected from the house?
Yes.
And were these the carpet cuttings from the Hyde Avenue house?
Yes.
And what about these items? Where did they come from? The blanket, pillows, towel sheet, carpet, latex glove, and the Reebok shoe.
From the dumpster.
Obviously, the car items came from the Mazda,
Yes, ma'am.
and the Timberlands from the Libertyville address.
Yes, ma'am.
Who are those other people that the lab analyst read? Emily Sutherland, John Lyle, Lenny Frazier. We haven't heard their names before.
Those are all individuals that could possibly have been in the Dodge Charger at some point. We have to take swabs of individuals so that we can exclude them or include them in the analysis. So when Detective Rutherford does his investigation and talks to Christopher Jensen, one of the things we do to make it easier for the lab and for the processing is to get as much information as we possibly can, which includes getting anybody that could possibly be inside that vehicle at any given time.
And were those acquaintances of Christopher Jensen?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we've heard a lot in this trial of questions about the backseat of the car. Can you tell the jury what you know about the backseat and when you knew things about the backseat?
Okay. I know the back seat was cut out of the car. That we know. I know that I was informed when Detective Peters got to the dumpster and he told Lieutenant Kessinger that they found it. I understood that they found it. I know now that we do not have the back seat. We never had the back seat. And it wasn't until months later when Anwan Carter gave the distinct and clear testimony,
With interview?
interview of where a possible location of the backseat could be. I went into depth with Anwan Carter on several levels to try and figure out where that backseat was. And I could not locate it in any way, shape, or form. I tried desperately.
Did he tell you a neighborhood?
He told me a neighborhood, but as I'm sure you're well aware of, you can't go to a judge and get a search warrant for a geographical area without some specifics.
So until Carter's interview on October 16th, did you have any direction to take about where to locate this backseat?
No.
And until you got Kimmer's report on the dumpster on September 7th, did you even realize that CSU didn't have the backseat?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Does anybody need a break before we begin cross-examination? All right, great.
Detective, you were lead on the case of Larry and Maurice, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And not involved in the investigation of the Christopher Jones shooting, correct?
No, I was not.
So only what we've been referring to as the May 22nd incident, we'll say, is what you were lead on, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, as lead, that means that you oversee the case, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You, as lead, are responsible for the investigation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Part of that includes supervising the roles and duties of other officers
Yes, ma'am.
and overseeing the collection of evidence.
Yes, ma'am.
So you were responsible for the evidence that was sent to the lab for testing in this case?
Like, and what form? I'm sorry.
Responsible in, I guess, as lead, deciding what to send to the lab.
There were several discussions on a round table as far as what we should send and what we shouldn't send. As a lead detective, you have to rely on the people that are around you and the CSU techs, because honestly, that's not my profession.
But you would agree that you're the case officer listed on the laboratory forms?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you requested several examinations of evidence in this case then, it sounds like,
Yes, ma'am.
including the shoe and tire print identification.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you asked the lab as part of that to compare the tire tracks and the shoe prints that were found at the scene of where Larry and Maurice were located, to compare those to Mr. Rhodes' suspected vehicles, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And his suspected shoes.
Yes, ma'am.
And you could not identify Brice's vehicle as making those tire tracks.
I believe, and I could be wrong, ma'am, but I don't think they included or excluded it.
I just want to know, did you get a positive identification on those tracks belonging to either of Brice Rhodes' vehicles that have come up?
I don't believe we got a positive or a negative, ma'am. I think that how they stated it they could not be included or excluded.
But the question is, you didn't get a positive to match.
No.
Okay. And Brice's shoes were not a match to the footprints.
No, ma'am.
You showed the jury, I'm sorry, you didn't personally, one of your colleagues, I believe, showed the jury a picture of the blue Mazda in this case, in which luminol had been sprayed.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
do you recall seeing that
No, I
photograph?
was not here that day.
Okay. Have you seen that picture before, though, at
Yes,
some
ma'am.
point in the investigation? And there was some blue lit up in that vehicle that I guess law enforcement believed to be blood.
We interpret it as such, yes.
But when it was sent to the lab, it was not in fact blood, correct?
I don't think every part was. I would have to refer to we just had the testimony,
Right.
and I don't want to say differently than what the testimony said. A specific part? Can you give me a specific
I
part?
can flip back, but what I'm referring to is the picture that the jury saw. It had a bunch of blue on it,
Mm-hmm.
but that wasn't blood when the results came back.
I don't believe so, no, ma'am.
You also requested the lab perform DNA analysis on the evidence, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you tested under Larry Ordway's fingernails for DNA foreign to him. You tested the carpet, the blanket, other items. None of that had Brice's DNA on it, correct?
No, ma'am. It did not.
And in fact, the only piece of evidence that had Brice Rhodes's DNA on it was his steering wheel and the gear shift of his own vehicle, correct?
Correct.
The leather strap that was spoken about to restrain Larry Ordway,
Yes, ma'am.
that did not have Brice Rhodes's DNA on it, did it?
No, I do not believe so. I don't believe it had anybody's. I don't think they could pinpoint because it was too small of a sample.
Yes.
He's one of those kind of cops. So, what is the word? Is the word corruption? Well, all I know is the big thing is the backseat. That they have no right to lie like that. Then they're going to blame somebody else for it. It wasn't them. Oh, it was that. It was this. It was that. By no means. I allegedly think this guy is allegedly guilty. Incompetence. There you go. That is the word. And you never know how many other people these kind of things they've done stuff to. I mean, look at all the people that has been exonerated by DNA. It's scary, people. It's a scary thought. Oh, that Delphi case, I'm telling you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones-Brown.
Detective, you testified that Ann Juan Carter was interviewed by you.
The
Correct.
first time, yes, ma'am.
And isn't it true that Mr. Carter did not involve Brice in the death of Larry and Maurice until after you told Mr. Carter in that interview room that Brice was throwing him under the bus and blaming him for all the murders?
I would have to refer to the interview. If you have it, I'll be happy to refer to it. If you could show me the page and information, that'd be great.
So he wasn't prepared. Now, was he? He was prepared to tell what he felt he wanted to share. That's what's up here with this guy. And it seems like he don't care for females.
Amen.
Thank you, ma'am.
And this is a long
Thank you, ma'am.
transcript, Detective, but I've
Thank you, ma'am.
turned to the page of where I believe that you said that.
Can I?
Help.
Can I?
Sure.
Thank you
Feel
so
free
much.
to feel free to look.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, bye, Grandma. Have a good day.
Are you sure this was me and not Sergeant Lesser, ma'am?
This was from the first interview on May the 24th.
Let's pray
during
for
the
Grandma's
second
back.
part.
Prayer hands. in the
Right.
back.
I believe that was Sergeant Lesser.
But you were present
No, ma'am, I was observing.
from another room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't believe this was me. I believe that was Sergeant Lesher. I could be mistaken because their names are not on there. Our transcripts have names.
I understand. But you will acknowledge that that was said to Mr. Rhodes, or excuse me, to Mr. Carter.
As an investigative tactic, absolutely.
Thank you.
Can you remind me what it was? I'm sorry.
Judge, my question was that to Detective Tonelli that isn't it true that Mr. Carter did not mention Brice Rhodes being involved in the murders of Larry and Maurice until after one of the detectives told Mr. Carter that Brice had been throwing him under the bus?
Thank you.
But we just watched Mr. Rhodes' interview, and you did interview Mr. Rhodes.
Yes.
And that was not true, was it?
I'm sorry, what?
That Brice had thrown Anwan Carter under the bus.
We use investigative tactics to gather the truth, ma'am.
Ma'am, but sir, but I'm asking you if it is true that when you told Mr. Carter that, had Brice Rhodes actually thrown him under the bus? Was that true? A true statement to Mr. Carter?
But ma'am, I was not the one that conducted the interview.
Detective Tonelli,
You
it is
conducted
a
the
yes or no.
interview
Was
with-
it true or not?
But I wasn't the one that stated
You
that.
know if it was true or not, don't you?
Oh, yes, yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
please
I'm sorry.
answer.
I was confused about, I apologize. Yes. No, it was not true.
And Brice hadn't actually said anything about Anwan Carter at that point.
No, ma'am.
And to persuade Anwan to talking to you, you also, or possibly Miss Sergeant Lesher, told him, "Don't worry about the truck you stole. We're not concerned about that."
I don't know if he said that, ma'am. I would have to see the transcript, but I'm sure another investigative tactic that we would use is to lessen a lesser crime to get to the murder of children.
You also told Mr. Rhodes, I believe, that there was a video of him in the Charger, and that wasn't correct either, was it?
No, that was an investigative tactic, ma'am.
You also told Anwan Carter and Ja'Cory Taylor, in an effort to get them to talk, that you had collected a back seat, correct?
That's possible. I don't remember and don't recall.
During the interviews, there were several of Anwan Carter, several names, other names came up. Is that true? He in the course of his conversation, a lot of names were thrown out there, correct?
I'm not sure, ma'am. That's 7 years ago, but if you gave me the transcript, I'd be more than happy to look through it.
Well, let me ask you specifically, do you remember him telling you that when Larry and Maurice were killed, that there was at one point 2 black men and a white woman there?
Yes.
And do you remember him also talking about a light-skinned man that was there?
I believe in the context in which you're speaking, and I'm not trying to confuse the situation, he was describing the 2 that he had mentioned before. So he was saying there was 2 other gentlemen there, a light-skinned individual and a dark-skinned individual and a white female, and the white female had left before anything.
But that's not what he told you. That's your interpretation of it, correct?
I believe that's what he told me. If it's my interpretation, that's what I told him.
He also told you that his cousin Q had dropped him off that night.
Yes.
And you did not push him. Isn't it true? You did not push him about any of these people, whether it be their identity, their alibi, like you did when he brought up the name Brice Rhodes.
No, ma'am, that's not true. Because in the later on, months down the road, when we did the 3rd interview with Mr. Carter,
Right.
we also did the photo pack and got another individual that was involved in the crime. And
But my question to you, Detective, is you testified that someone had told Anwan Brice was throwing you under the bus. You didn't tell Mr. Carter these other people are throwing you under the bus, or even try to find out who the light-skinned person was that was there. I think is what you testified a while ago, that you never found out.
well, ma'am, we can't invent people. We have to go off the evidence that's presented before us. We take that evidence, we research it, and then we go forward. If we can't find anything, we definitely can't invent it.
So Anwan and Ja'Cory were able to describe all of these people that were there except for this one individual. Is that fair to say?
I mean, ma'am, they did the best, I guess, the best they could with the description as far as It's just like the white female. We don't know who she is. They described it as a white female and a light-skinned male and a dark-skinned male.
Detective, you wrote an investigative report in this case, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're familiar with that report?
Fairly familiar. Yes, ma'am.
Let me find it here. You have a copy of that with you
I do,
today?
ma'am. Thank you.
The date on page 1 of your report is listed as what?
May 22nd, 2016.
And that's, I'm assuming when you started the investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what that date reflects?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you flip, officer, to page 10 of your report,
Yes, ma'am.
there is a spot at the very end.
Page 10 of my report,
Yes,
of my investigative letter.
yes.
I have page 9.
I'm looking at page 10 that says conclusion.
Okay, that's 9 on here.
Is it a different number?
Yes,
Mine says 10. I apologize.
Yes.
On that page, on the last page of your report, we'll call it, there is a spot that says investigator signature and supervisor signature.
Mhm.
And you did not sign that, correct?
It's signed. Yes, ma'am.
The copy that I have, if I may approach the witness,
You may.
does not purport to have any signature on it, correct?
On
On my copy.
Not on your
Any,
copy.
this is the only copy I've ever seen.
Okay.
So I don't have any way of telling when this report ended. And I don't have any way of telling if it was approved by your supervisor. Is that typically what these signatures are for?
No,
What
we
is,
don't.
what is the signature at the end of the document for then?
As you can, on my copy right here, you can see, you sign it and put your code number, and then your supervisor signs it and puts their code number.
Prior to the date, May 22nd, 2016, there weren't any suspects in the Christopher Jones murder as far as you know. I know you said that you were not lead detective.
I didn't do anything on that case. I honestly don't know.
To your knowledge, it was Brice Rhodes a suspect in that case at that point on May 22nd?
Like I said before, ma'am, I have no idea.
I think your testimony a while ago was that you first learned that Christopher Jones, that you thought these two incidents were related, not up until this point, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Like I didn't know they were related at all until the interviews were conducted, and then I made the phone call to Brian Griffin because I had no information about his case.
On page, well, I know our page numbers appear to be
That's
a little
okay,
bit
ma'am.
different.
We'll do the best we can.
On page 8 of my report,
Okay. What's the title?
subsequent investigation,
Okay, ma'am.
you see that part?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On that part of your report is where you talk about the back seat of Brice's car having been removed in an attempt to possibly hide evidence of a crime, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that report, you reported that the back seat was recovered from a dumpster fire, correct?
That is what I knew at the time.
You talked about testifying at the preliminary hearing in this case on June the 3rd of 2016, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that would have been the month following the deaths in this case, correct?
Well, that would have been like 7 or 8 days.
Right, but the following month.
Yes.
Thank you. And you testified at the preliminary hearing, and the testimony is an effort to continue charging Brice with these accusations.
Probable cause. It's called a PC hearing. Yes, ma'am.
And you were under oath when you testified, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you told the judge at that time that the back seat of Brice's car had been removed, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you also told the judge that Brice acted alone in transporting the bodies of Larry and Maurice after they were killed. And that wasn't true either, was it?
at that point, with the information that we had, I believe that, I don't want, that's 7 years ago, ma'am. I don't know if we knew of the other two participants transporting the bodies with Brice or not. I can't remember.
After that, in July, following month after preliminary hearing, July 13th, 2016, you testified to the grand jury, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was also under oath.
Yes, ma'am.
And you had sworn to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
You told the entire grand jury that you had located where Brice dumped the back seat, correct?
Yes, and during that grand jury, the only thing I can say is that in the preliminary hearing, the PC hearing, I caveated with the statement that we believe we have the back seat. It's in the transcript. We believe we have the back seat. We're waiting for the forensic analysis. Up until that point, and when I went to the grand jury, and testified that we had the back seat. I did not put the caveat in there, but I had not received the CSU reports, and I was going on good faith of the information that I had received during the investigation.
I said I wasn't going to use that, but I think the jury can still see it.
Feel free to move it if you need to.
Yeah, I just want to, you had a lot going on.
Yes, ma'am.
It sounds like.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think that's fair to say that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are just physically unable to be everywhere at one place, right?
Correct.
And would it be fair to say that you may not know approximately, I mean, you may not know exactly, but if you can tell the jury approximately, if this is correct, that there were about, when I looked through the evidence, there were about 41 law enforcement officers involved in this case, 27 lab techs, 7 property clerks, for a total of around 75 people that are even just listed, not to mention the ones that weren't. Is that fair assumption to say that many people were involved in investigating? And
I don't want to speak to numbers, ma'am. I can't. I mean, if you looked at it, I mean, I don't think you would lie. So I don't know.
And you cannot monitor every single one of these people 24/7 as to what they're doing and if they're doing it appropriately, correct?
Correct. But we are all trained the same way, and we are all doing the very best job, especially when we're dealing with such a heinous situation.
And one of the biggest things it sounds like that you guys had going on was communicating information back and forth during this busy time, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
I mean,
had to
information
talk
is
to each other and-
information is constantly flowing, but you got to remember that this is not the only case that's going on.
Right.
I mean, yes, information is flowing, but it's not the only case.
So you told the jury today that you testified to the preliminary hearing in June of 2016.
Correct.
You testified at the grand jury in July of 2016.
Correct.
Do you remember 3 years later, in September of 2019, this court held an evidentiary hearing?
Yes.
Do you recall that?
I do, ma'am.
And do you recall the judge specifically asking you, what evidence are you going to bring up to the courtroom for this hearing?
Absolutely.
And so 3 years after you had told the grand jury that you had a back seat,
Mhm.
you told this court, I'm going to bring the back seat up to the courtroom, Judge.
That is not what I said, ma'am.
Tell us what you said.
we were inside the court. It was at the end of the court. We were trying to decide because there's over 200 pieces of evidence inside this case. And the judge asked, what's the biggest piece of evidence you have on the spot? And I was thinking and racking my brain. And I said, I don't know, the back seat, the carpet. I don't know, sir. And that's exactly how it went down. It was a misspeak, if you will. But I didn't, at that point, was not under oath, didn't say anything of that nature, just blurted it out.
And there's no backseat.
No, ma'am, there is not.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Can you all approach just for a moment? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Jones-Brown.
Okay, when we were here in court 3 years after the fact, talking about evidence to bring up, how often, how many murder cases did you have while you were in homicide, of which you were lead?
Over 8 that I was lead on, over 9, I don't know.
And then how many did you assist on?
We had, I think, somewhere around 100 and over 125 homicide cases. And if you were working, you were involved. Unless you were presently investigating a case at that moment, if you were working, you were involved. If you had downtime, you were involved. Overtime, you were involved. So a lot.
And when did you all also have overdoses?
Oh, yeah. And suicides and overdoses and death investigations.
And how many overdoses were there at that period?
I have no idea.
Did you all have shootings, or was that separate?
Okay, so shootings were separate.
And by shootings, we mean where people are shot.
Yeah, we call it non-fatal. They didn't die. Yes, they were included in homicide, and we assisted with them, but we were not the lead detectives in those non-fatal shootings.
So in this case, you learn from, did you say Lieutenant Kessinger?
Lieutenant Kessinger.
Lieutenant Kessinger, that Peters has identified the dumpster where he thinks there's a back seat.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you know, was Peters talking about an intact back seat like you would extract from a minivan, or was he talking about fabric cut out of a back seat that would be in a smaller car? Or did you know?
I didn't know.
Okay.
And I honestly couldn't recall.
Okay. And when you thought that the back seat had been part of the many items recovered from the dumpster, did you return to this case to confirm what had been recovered and sent to the lab?
No.
Did you just let things happen at the lab?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Because, first of all, our CSU techs, it's a controlled and very much, we don't have access. We can't just walk down and walk in there and look at evidence. It's not how it works because it's evidence. So when that starts motion, the lead detective does not have access to it unless he's accompanied or let in there to get access to it. So there's no way that you wait for the CSU reports to come to you.
And so while this is going on, do you call the lab every week to see what's going on?
No, actually, we all know at that point with the situation that we have at the lab, it's about a year out before we get any results from the lab itself. So we're not calling because every time we call, we're taking away from their time at the lab. So we don't call.
And would it have made any difference to your analysis of this case, the arrest that you made, the investigation that you took, if you had realized that what Peters found in that dumpster was blankets and sheets and not a back seat?
No, absolutely not.
When you got information about where the back seat was from Mr. Carter, did you attempt to walk him through Did you pull up a map on a cell phone in an attempt to find it?
Yes, in the interview, we were trying to locate it as best we possibly could. We were expanding. I mean, everything.
Do you wish you had the backseat?
Yes.
When you interviewed Mr. Carter and he told you of these, well, how many people did he tell you were also involved that we have not heard?
That we have not.
That we have not heard from in court?
That we have not. Okay.
Or heard. All right, he said Brice Rhodes was involved, right?
Yes.
He said, obviously Maurice and Larry were there.
Corey Taylor.
Okay. Who else did he say?
He said that a dark-skinned male, a light-skinned male were involved.
Okay. And he said a female who left.
Who
was not
left
involved.
before anything started.
What information did he give you about the dark-skinned male?
I would have to recall, I would have to look at it, but I'm paraphrasing here, and please forgive me. I know he told us it was a dark-skinned individual, and I believe he said he might have recognized him from one of Brice's videos.
Were there YouTube rap videos out?
Yes.
And was he able to direct you to a video so that you could see a picture of this man?
Yes.
Okay. And is that how you identified the dark skin? Who will call the dark skinned male?
That's how we went forward with it, to try and find the dark-skinned male. Once we were able to do that, we contacted, I believe it was KSP, and created a photo pack, and Juan Carter was able to pick him out of the photo pack.
Was he able to give you this sort of information about who we will refer to as the light skinned male?
No. Said he did not know him, did not who he was, had never seen him before.
Did you ever get any more information than light skinned male?
No, I did not.
During the interview with Anwan, you were asked whether other people were identified, such as Q Taylor. Did somebody interview Q?
Yes.
Okay. Did you all have any reason to get Q involved in this case for dropping his cousins off at a place where, as far as they knew at that time, a party was going to happen?
No.
Okay. As to the Blue Star on the Mazda, was the whole Mazda shipped to the lab?
No.
How do you all get possible DNA from a vehicle to the lab?
We swab it.
And what do you, for each swab, and have you seen these swabs take place? For each swab, do they swab the whole car or do they just swab a swab?
You swab specific points. You have a control swab, and then you have another swab. You moisten the other swab it, and they're kept separate in a separate box for each one.
And we heard from the lab tech a discrete number of swabs were sent.
Yes. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
The shoes, so you had a shoe print at the scene.
Yes, ma'am.
And that you asked the lab, or somebody from homicide asked the lab to test that against certain items, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What did they test that against?
I believe they tested against other shoes that were collected.
How many shoes that were collected did you know were associated with Brice Rhodes?
Actually, I don't know if any of them were. Maybe one.
Well, was he wearing shoes when he was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. Were those shoes sent?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you all go back to Haight Avenue and collect shoes?
I don't believe so, no.
Have you reviewed the search warrant? Is there a page at the end of a search warrant where
Yes.
you list what was collected?
Yes, ma'am.
Were any
I can get
shoes,
them.
were any shoes collected from Haight Avenue?
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
Judge Matt?
Yes.
Detective, I just have a quick question for you that I want to clarify something for the jury.
Sure, ma'am.
You testified when Ms. Jones-Brown was just or originally questioning you today. You mentioned something called Cellbrite. And you said the Cellbrite machine wasn't working.
No, it was working. It just wouldn't read the phone. It's in Mickey Kahn's letter. If you can refer to that, he is the individual, Detective Kahn is the individual that did the analysis on the
Okay.
phone.
Can you tell the jury just what is Cellbrite?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not Cellbrite certified.
I know, but do you know what it is?
Yeah.
What kind of evidence you can get from it, or what is? Just give them a general idea. It doesn't have to be a.
Sure. If the Cellbrite machine hooks up to the cell phone, it can do a download from the cell phone of information. I can't get into the specifics because I get a disc, a download disc, or a copy of whatever, and then it's interpreted for me.
And if that machine had worked, you said you tried to use it. Whose phone did you try to?
Maurice's,
Maurice's. And if it had worked, it would have shown who Maurice had texted, what websites he had visited, his contacts, his documents, his downloads, all of that kind of thing, correct?
don't know, man. I don't know if it
You
was
don't
shown.
know if that's no, I'm talking about, is that the normal kind of information you receive from a Cellbrite report?
At that time, in 2016, I don't know. I really don't know because it's been so long. Nowadays, when we do a download on a phone, yes, that information is available now because we use a similar, it's no longer called Cellbrite, but we use a similar machine now. I'm in Robert. We use a similar machine now that gives us all that information. If you're asking me if we were accessing that information in 2016, I don't recall, ma'am.
Do you recall if you attempted to run Cellbrite information on anybody else's phone, Mr. Rhodes' phone, anything, anybody else involved in the case?
I do not recall. No.
No further questions.
All right, Detective Snelly, you can step down. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to break. I just want to ask the lawyers one scheduling thing, if you don't mind to come up. So
I'm really shocked this guy has been behaving. So what do you think of that detective?
all right, and just to be clear, does the Commonwealth have any further witnesses?
Your Honor, that is the case for the Commonwealth.
All right, thank you very much. We are going to go ahead and break. I'm going to read the full admonition to you again. Maybe we'll all know it by heart at the end of this. You must decide this case based solely on the evidence presented here within the four walls of this courtroom. During this trial, you must not use search engines, websites, blogs, or any other electronic tools to conduct any research about this case, post information about this case, or help you deliberate on this case. During the course of the trial, do not communicate online with anyone connected to the trial, including witnesses, counsel, other jurors, and experts. Do not record or photograph any part of these proceedings. If you accidentally encounter information about the case from any source, it is your duty to bring it immediately to the attention of the court. Now, on Monday, I have some other court issues completely unrelated to this case that I have to deal with. So what we're going to do is have you not come Monday until 12:30. So, have your lunch before you come, because we'll just be taking short, restroom walk around breaks after that. So be back Monday outside these courtroom doors, courtroom 703 at 12:30 p.m. Please try to be on time so we can get started. And we are still very much on track to have you done well before next Friday. Okay. All right. Thank you all.
All rise for the jury.
Oh, thank you for moving that. Sorry.
So the state has rested their case. So Monday, defense is up. That's when it's going to get good.
Just a second.
Judge, I have a motion.
Just one moment, please.
Yep. And who knows what else?
See this while this was going on? Oh my God.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. I am moving the court to direct a verdict for the defendant and dismiss this case on the basis that no reasonable jury could make a finding of guilt on the basis of the evidence that has been presented by the Commonwealth. Judge, the Commonwealth has not met its burden of proof by proving every element of every charge in the indictment, and I don't believe that any reasonable juror could infer otherwise.
Is that just a general DV to all charges?
Yes, to
Okay.
every.
You don't want to address any charge in particular?
Specifically, no. I'm saying every element of every charge in the indictment has not been met.
Okay, that's denied. I think in the light most favorable to the Commonwealth, there has been, I certainly cannot find that they've not met a single element. That's why I'm like, do you not have a more particular motion? Which I'm willing to hear, but
Judge, the biggest basis of the motion would be that the unreliability of the witnesses, that the witnesses have all given different statements and no juror could be able to rely on those.
can you tell me which witnesses you're referring to?
The co-defendants specifically.
Okay. Given the evidence thus far, I certainly agree that it is a fair game for the defense to argue the credibility of those witnesses. However, for purposes of directed verdict, and Mr. Rhodes, I want you to know this as well, for purposes of directed verdict, the law requires the court review the evidence that's been presented so far in the light most favorable to the state. And I do believe that throughout the last few days, or 4 days, I guess, that the state has produced through testimony and other evidence, when viewing it in the light most favorable to them, enough evidence that they would survive a directed verdict motion. I don't find that any particular element is lacking, nor has that been brought to my attention. Anything else?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. We need, yeah.
Yes, we have an issue.
Okay.
Detective Tonelli, can we do it up the?
Yes, of course. Do you want this on the record?
Sure.
I think it's funny how the defense is always asking to dismiss the case. They all do, though, don't they? Well, I don't think they did on Letitia's, though. The judge. No. So they're done for the day. Why do guys always do that? Play with their beard. You ever wonder that? I do.
Copy of the trial this morning. Is that
Yes,
something-
actually, I can do that as soon as we're done. If you have like a,
Thumb drive.
yeah,
And we would.
We would
just
request
say-
the same.
sure.
Judge.
Do you all have a thumb
I
drive?
believe we do. Yeah.
If you do, great. If not, I can give it to you Monday or something. I might even be able to burn it.
I imagine it needs to be pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
Um,
Tom.
that's
You're-
what I was
you're
just
addressing
thinking.
the
I was
judge.
thinking, well, I might be able to burn it, but I don't think a disc would be big enough. Can I go ahead and call the records up and
Absolutely.
start it?
So I wasn't, this is my first.
All right.
Oh, I hate it when they mute it. Because I'm just nosy like that. So I guess he's wearing shocker cuffs.